So I'll be nice to you. This is not going to be a full hour, so we have to get out early for those who have not started drinking. I'll be kind to you. And I try to avoid talks that rant on about things, but I felt we need to rant about things, about passwords. It's a really important thing. I hate this slide, so we'll pass it really quickly. I've been in the industry for a couple years. Been coming to these events for a very long time. And I really think that we can have a good discussion here. So I want to have an environment here. So feel free to shout out anything you wish to. If there's things that we go through this, you find that you are strongly opinionated about, please feel free to contribute. And let's have some fun with it and kind of move through it quickly. So who here uses passwords? Who has a regulatory compliance part of requiring password controls? No, a few. I'm surprised. Maybe you should go check your regs, folks. I'm sure you have more than you realize. But passwords are something we have to live with, and it's one of those things that's been around since systems were first started. This is just a small list, but there are many things that are driving this, and I'll get into a couple things in the end that even the DoD is pushing that's going to be a big challenge going forward on some of this. I'm sure you've seen all these before, so hopefully someone here has more that I don't have, but password policies. Hopefully some people here have had to live with them and have the same feeling I do about them. But same basic things we had to deal with for everywhere. You know, only certain complex passwords, certain length of passwords. They have to have, they can't be transmitted, stored, and encrypted. That comes right from PCI. You can have all the basic things we deal with passwords. And does anyone have a thing I forgot? Is there a fun password policy that we've worked on somewhere that doesn't fit these? I'm not expecting an answer, but I'd love to hear one. So my answer to this is, and can I curse? It's streaming? Can we curse in this?
Streaming.
Can we curse?
Sure.
So
absolutely.
This actually means fuck passwords. So like we're in church now. What do y'all think about passwords?
Fuck passwords.
There we go. We'll practice this. This will come up a few times in this presentation here. So feel free to get your energy up. This is the end of the B-sides. You want to have some energy get out of this. Let's go forward and have some fun with it. Oops. Skipped past a lot. So in a typical corporate environment, it's not just one place you have passwords. If you're a small company, you might just have a domain controller and 2 or 3 machines, but realistically, it's never just that. You have your domain, you have, naturally you're going to have some docs in Google Docs, you're going to have some stuff in Office 365. Who here has like mainframes or large back-end computers? Yeah, actually, almost a third of the room here. And they're not going away. Data center stuff. I know we have the cloud, but you're going to have data center stuff somewhere in some environment. KVMs. Who has KVM switches? Whose KVM switches are integrated into Pasture Management? Let's get into that one later. Every one of these systems, they're all different. There's third-party services. There's all the integrated stuff. You probably have some cloud stuff. Everything out there has passwords and password controls. So picture you're at a company. Anyone here sysad, ever worked at a sysad, seen these user access request forms? New user comes in, they have a role defined. Let's go create passwords. So how much fun would you have in a typical environment where you've got 20, 30 separate systems, and you have to go out and create unique passwords, get them to the users, explain to the users which is which, how many support calls do you expect you're going to have? Which password is which? How does it work? I'm confused. But that's pretty common because in reality, they're all separate. We have different ways we'll get into in a minute of how people are tying them together and making passwords, easier to manage. But realistically, most of the systems that we deal with, especially for new companies, and that's one of the things I want to focus on here is, picture you're a new company and you're just starting out and you have all these separate systems. So you're going to have 10, 15, 20, 30 separate systems trying to manage passwords. It's really, really difficult. And you want to try to do it in following your password policies, making sure things are unique. And I want to share, I'll summarize this story for you, but I want to share this story. I put out the word to all my friends saying, hey, I'm going to talk about passwords. Share some cute, fun stories with me about the problems you've had in passwords out there. A good friend of mine came back and said, hey, look at this. We generate unique passwords. Our sysadmin function, we have a modem that we've converted into a digital clock. It's cool. It's like, taking an old Hayes modem, we've actually reused it, it makes a clock, and we're doing all of our passwords. So we come up and we put change it, followed by the 4-digit number that's randomly done on the clock. So the friend asked him, are these Unix systems? Because this is 20 years ago. Still applies in some places. And he goes, oh, interesting. Wait, change it. It's 8 characters. Unix password, 8 characters and truncates. All of our passwords are changing. So, yes, I just want to basically say, fuck passwords. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about one login at all?
We're going to get to that in a second, yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of going through the steps of, we're a small company, and this is actually something I'm going through right now. Some people are in enterprises, they have legacy systems. But in new companies, you still have the same problems. We're trying to figure this out. And I couldn't just talk about one login about one thing, because we want to at least fill some time. So, password management. So now that we've actually got 30 different passwords we've gotten out there for all of our users, a new user comes on board, we do all the passwords, we say, okay, let's do password management. We have to make it easy for them. Our password management tool is really made for admins to put passwords in so other people can use them. They're really not designed for corporate environments. They have some tools that help, but realistically, they really are a repository for people to use. Who here has executives they're trying to get teach on 1Password? Non-technical people, your salespeople, your marketing people, your PR folks. Here, let's give you a technical solution. Put it in your browser and it generates passwords for you. Yeah, they're lucky they get Facebook working. 1Password is a great idea, but we know how to use it. People really don't know how to use it. And plus, it doesn't really touch everything. We go back to our mapping of all the different services. Does 1Password manage your SSH keys for all your cloud servers? Does it manage your mainframe passwords?
Yes.
In some ways, yes. Some ways, no. I mean, yes, we can copy a key into there. Yes, you can copy into it. But does it manage your SSH keys?
I'll get to it during the question. It does for me.
So,
but these are not publicly available.
Well, then maybe here's a great forum to make them publicly available. I'm glad you're here. We can have some public disclosure of stuff. Even more fun third-party apps. I have different colors here because some do work, some don't work. And then I have in the bottom there encrypted disks. We all have requirements. If you're in environments, you have to have data, secure data. You encrypt the disks. There really are no tools out there to manage centrally encrypted. You can do revocation and different things with it, but realistically, having end users who changes their passwords on their encrypted disk every 3 months. Yeah, I think I'm the only one. Yeah, so it's a problem. Plus, we start seeing fun things out there. 1Password, they just announced they're pulling away from their local storage and making you go to the cloud offering. Do you really want to have your passwords in the cloud? That's one of those questions you need to ask your enterprise. Are you comfortable with these tools taking all of your passwords and putting in one place? Especially seeing things like OneLogin, hacked with exposure of the passwords. Are you really comfortable putting your entire corporate environment, all your users, in one cloud provider? That's really, it's one of those questions out there that really makes it a difficult use of these tools, which is causing folks, I don't know if you can see who this came from, Emirates. They came out and said, we don't really think you should use password managers. What happens if the devices get hacked? So people are now starting to feel uncomfortable with password managers. So how do we solve that problem? I mean, there's really no easy answer, except say fuck passwords, right? We got to get past this. And that's why the gist of my talk here. I'm kind of pointing these things out. A lot of us really understand and feel the same exact thing about all of this. That's one reason why I didn't want to make it a full hour. I really wanted to say, we're here to have this conversation, to really look at what are we doing to solve this problem, because we are the group of people who are going to go beyond these password managers and go and figure out how to make these things work. So back to our fictional user. We created all these user accounts. The user comes in on his first day, and what happens? Password reset time. So they come in the office the first day. They've got 40 passwords to change, a brand new password manager, which they've never used before. They're somewhere in marketing or a junior dev person. So you spend 2 days on the phone with them, walking them through changing passwords and how to get on the machines and training them how to use these tools. And it's not efficient. And I don't want to make this into a complaining bitch fest, but it really is. I mean, this is one of the things that we as an industry have not... Uh-oh. It crashed. That's good. Oh. Yay, LibreOffice. Come here. Where is it? I'm sorry, y'all. Where'd it go? technology. It solves all of our problems, right? It does. I apologize, y'all. I thought of using Google Sheets, but I was like, maybe the internet won't work, so I'll do this. Sorry. I'm not even doing a live demo. And start back up again. No, don't recover. Just go. There we go. So basically, we get our user. They come in there. They have the first day. They say, "Okay, welcome to the company. Go change your password on everything." You have plenty of time, right? You're starting a new job. You have time to go out and figure these things out. But to the end users, it kind of feels like this. They're just like, "Great, I started the job. Now I have to spend a whole day doing password management." And I'm not sure about how many people in here. I know a couple of folks I met earlier. We talked earlier. I know your users have a lot of systems and a lot of passwords, and this really fits that model. And even in smaller companies, it's not quite as bad as this. But if you have 5 or 10 or 15 passwords, it really feels like this to the end users. We need to find a better way of making this work. And we also need to remember, we got to require unique passwords for our users. We're asking them to do things that are really not intuitive to them. Passwords are not something people think about. We're lucky we can remember our phone numbers. Trying to remember all the passwords to make that all work is difficult. So they always end up back in the old default. They make one password, applied across all systems, which is what we don't want. So because of what we're doing, the tools we're providing to users, they're not able to actually ever do what we need of them, having unique passwords, having changing passwords. It just doesn't work. So the solutions are out there. People are trying to make things work and go out there, and I'm going to come back again and say, fuck passwords. This really shouldn't be this hard. We've been doing passwords for 50 years. Longer if you think outside technology, but in computers, we've been doing this for a while. Because what's going to happen? 3 months in, you're going to have to do all this all over again. Every 3 months, all of your users are going through all the passwords for all the systems. And as we know, they're not going to change passwords on things that are not easily accessible. They're not going to change their encrypted disk password. They're not going to change their Google password. They're going to keep things the same because it's not seen or managed or controlled. Which brings me back again. And this is going to be a mantra. Y'all are going to leave this hall and be like going down the hall going, fuck passwords. Because it really is. It should not be this hard, but it is. So what happened is, over time, people have started saying, okay, let's integrate these things. Let's make it so they can all talk together. So we use a part of the domain controller. We use LDAP on it. We tie it into our radius. We have TACX. We have all these other fun tools to make it all work. But as you can see, there's still a bunch of things that still don't talk to it. So even with this model, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 still separate passwords you have to manage. We've made it easier, but overall, we really haven't done much to help people get better at this. So again, there's things people are working on that's trying to make this a little better. But coming back to it, new regs come down the line. So we've finally getting to a point things are starting to be integrated. We're starting to integrate in LDAP and have Active Directory. And folks come down the lines. And anyone here work in DoD stuff? I didn't think anyone would actually say yes, but so you're familiar with DFARS and the things coming down for two-factor authentication. So there are regs coming down, and even in PCI, there's a big push to push people toward multi-factor authentication. So we haven't even gotten passwords right. And now people are saying, let's just go to multi-factor. And that was actually the goal of what I was going to try to talk about today. I was going to try to build a talk that really showed how we could actually build an enterprise using multi-factor. But as I started putting it together and looking at just the tools that I have to use for my users, I get to a point where it's like, I can't do that yet. And I wanted to really talk about and map this out and start a dialogue. And I'm hoping that some of you will come from here and have some dialogue with people in your teams and figure out how can we manage this. So I've got a few more tools I want to go through. And again, I told you this is going to be a really short talk. I'm hoping we can push 20 minutes. No, it should be 25 minutes. But so looking at some other tools, how do we actually get beyond this? So IAM, Identity and Access Management Systems. These tools are there in Okta, ForgeRock. I'm actually looking at ForgeRock. It's a little bit easier to manage than Okta. And it tries to actually take that next step above the LDAP, above the Radius and TACX, to really provide more centralized control for the users. And it has features and tools it can do. As you can see, it can integrate your Amazon. You can tie things together and actually do better automation of the management of passwords. So you can start doing better control of it. You're not going to be dependent on a domain controller for all of it. You can actually pull out of that and have better access to tools out there. And there's one thing I don't have in here, which I'll bring up again, but the focus of this really was on the users. Don't forget there's also applications sitting out there. So we have databases and stuff. There's the application side of this. And I do want to bring up a tool that I've actually been talking to a friend who was part of a team that made it that helped solve that problem. But using these tools, you can actually start integrating multi-factor. But the first two ones, Google. I mean, everyone here probably uses Google Authenticator. I use it. You even log in my laptop. But Google Authenticator, itself is not linked. You can't really tie Google Authenticator into your Okta or IAM system because it really, well, parts of it can, but really is separate unless you're using a third-party tool that uses it. So there are plenty of tools that use the Google Authenticator as the authentication tool. So you can actually build a tool called LinoTP to actually manage your own soft tokens using Google Authenticator, which that would expose a Radius interface to tie into those same tools. But then that would have to be a feeding into more feeds, and it's a kludge of things tying together. Has anyone ever used a YubiKey? It's a really cool little dual-factor authentication, but again, it needs something to tie into the back end. There's commercial tools that offer, and again, LinoTP is another one. Okta has links to tie into these services, so they're starting to get these features tied together. But the real problems can come back to the fact that they really don't solve all the problems still. They're really only applying to those environments that had the Radius and LDAP environments. A little overlap between Microsoft and Google Authenticator. They have their own controls separately. But overall, it really is the same environment we were at with LDAP. The same solutions are being solved, but now you can offer multi-factor, which, again, it makes it easier for users. You don't have passwords. Now you've got 2/3 of your systems out there configured with the multi-factor authentication, except for some of those core systems. You're still going to have servers in the data center that you have to get on the console. They're not LDAP or Radius enabled, so you're going to have static passwords on them. SSH key management, and you and I will talk about this in a little bit here. I want to see what you're talking about. There's another tool I'm looking at that I'll show in a second that deals with some of the problems with key management and application integration. But databases. I mean, I don't know if y'all ever manage databases, password management databases. It's really not matured in a long time. There's a lot of problems with databases. We could have a whole talk on security issues around databases. But that led me to another tool that I want to bring up here called CredHub. Does anybody actually use Cloud Foundry tools? And you guys should look at it. They have a great, your sector really was built around the Cloud Foundry tools. They help a lot in that space. But they have a whole bunch of tools that they've open sourced. He's like, who are you all? The company itself has done wonderful things. They've actually created a suite of tools that offer developers, financial services companies, and other things out there who are needing to have not just this, but development tools. How do you actually make a development lifecycle that has the agile and easy use around legacy and modern modern environments tied together? But CredHub is a really interesting thing. What it does is it actually allows you to integrate the password management into the rest of your environment. So with CredHub, you can actually manage your database passwords. You can actually manage your application passwords, which then comes in and clears up a bunch of things. So you can see I had one more thing in here for applications because I wanted to talk really about users, but I didn't want to forget the fact that applications are a big thing out there. We all have applications that are sitting there running that have passwords and other secure things built into them that there's nothing to manage it. So what happens if someone breaks into a web server and they get your SSH key or your encryption key off of your application? How do you change that password? How do you manage it? This can actually integrate right into the management of it. And you can see it overlaps into your IAM stuff, so it can actually integrate with IAM and automate the actual passwords within IAM to your other various systems. So it's a great set of tools for automating the passwords and the controls of all the pieces around it. So the actual whole point of my talk really comes down to CredHub tying together a lot of pieces, but also really the big thing is there still are things out there that are not solved. Now there are tools you can do in the mainframe space, but it really isn't made without add-ons and plugins and more money and more licenses to really expand upon that. And it just isn't. It wasn't designed to work with that stuff. and we still are going to have to live with all those problems. And then the final thing comes, what happens when someone leaves the company? So they change a role, they go somewhere else. What's going to happen? Now you've got all these SSH keys, you've got passwords, you've got two-factor tokens, you've got all these pieces and places all over the place. And are you actually going through and cleaning them out? And I'm sure there's a few auditors in here that have seen it doesn't happen. So again, back to my tagline, it really comes down to fuck passwords. We've got to do a better job. And I wish that I could have gone a little bit longer for y'all, but I told you I'd keep it short because it is the end of the day and y'all need to get their drinking. So I will end there and open it up for our discussion, questions, anything people want to talk about. Hi, Colleen.
Let's use the mic. I know you're just dying.
Yeah. Just first of all, I'm Jeffrey Goldberg from Agile Bits, the makers of 1Password.
Oh, awesome.
Some of the things you said about what we're doing or what you reported isn't actually correct. We did not announce any such thing, but it's been in the air. That's fine. I'll be happy to talk about all of that stuff with anybody when we get to the drinking part. And my raising my hand on the SSH keys, that's a cheat. We have our own internal command line kind of tool that we can script around for doing those things. So we've got an internal command line client that is not yet ready to be released to the public. So we can do a lot of that kind of management. So that doesn't take away from your point that password managers don't do that. I think generally what I want to say is that, we've been screaming fuck passwords for 30 years.
Yes.
And I've seen proposals to get rid of passwords come and go for more than 20 years when I first started trying to create my own.
Yes.
And so I do think that any proposal that's trying to solve this problem needs to actually take a look at why previous attempts failed. And so I would it's not a question. I'm sorry. I'm going.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's a dialogue.
I'm speech making here. We've all known all these problems that you've pointed out for a long time. A lot of people have put in efforts to try to come up with a password killer. And it hasn't happened yet. And there are reasons that those attempts have failed. And I would just advise people to look at why previous attempts failed and before starting out.
I'll throw this out there and say, next year at B-Sides or any other regional B-Sides that are happening throughout the year, why don't you come? You're in the space. You're in 1Password. I mean, you've got people in the trenches. And part of the reason I want to make this talk is some people don't see enterprise pictures. They're smaller teams. They're on pen testing teams or red teams. They don't really realize that on the operations side, the scale of how much work this is. So I invite you, please, come do a better talk than me. Come up here.
I started out in system administration.
I fully sympathize with the system or network administrator who has to deal with these things. That's where I got my start. So, yeah.
So please, and anyone else, it's not a problem. Come up here and speak yourself. Share your stories. Come back and share better ways of doing this. And I wanted to bring this talk up because, some people don't get a chance to see the bigger holistic picture because they're either breaking in, they're using these weaknesses to break into places.
And I want to just add that the basis of B-Sides is active discussion, not just receiving. And so I think we have this really awesome opportunity because we have a block of time, and I'm going to pass the mic around. I think this is really awesome. This is what we're supposed to be doing, is discussing, not receiving and taking information in.
Hi, my name's Christian, and by the way, hi to the gentleman from 1Password who gave a great talk here a couple of years ago, actually. I remember your talk.
This is the first year I haven't given a talk, so I don't know.
Okay. I think I missed last year, so it would have been the year before. But so you mentioned CredHub, and that's actually something I've just started looking at. I was wondering if you had more thoughts on CredHub. or more to add to that topic?
I'm actually just deploying it myself. One of my new projects I'm working on, one person we are really looking at working with us is with the team who built it. So I got a really good chance to meet with people at Cloud Foundry and talk to them about the tools they're using. And I'm really impressed. I've not had a chance to really start integrating it with the things, but I think what they've done, and they've recognized the fact, at least from my point of view, what I'm looking at using it for is on the application side. There are a lot of things you can do with SSH key management, multiple users and user management, account management within the servers. But I'm really focusing on application management, database management. So as you're deploying cloud servers and you're doing scaling across, if you need to change, I can change the passwords on my applications and databases daily. So it doesn't matter if someone hacks a server. The next, I can within 5 minutes change all that. So I'm just now deploying it. But if you want to keep in touch, you got my contact stuff. Let's keep talking.
Yeah. So sorry, I'll just jump back in since we're having a conversation here. So that was actually new to me, some of the capabilities that you talked about with CredHub. So I'm excited about that and excited to learn more about it. I was really just sort of looking at it from the credential management orchestration point for cloud things. But to emphasize the story that led us to the to our collective mantra of fuck passwords. I spent some time doing identity management and identity orchestration, and doing both federated and so single sign-on and same sign-on, right? Orchestration of distributing the password to all the different things.
Yes.
And it is a massive pain in the ass.
It is. It's hard to re-engineer it. If you already have running systems, you can't re-engineer what's already there.
Well, and particularly when you have a high diversity of systems that have different and competing construction constraints, to the point that you can't even make them agree. Like in the Microsoft world, you can do 3 out of 4, but in some other world, there's no 3 out of 4 option. It will contain, and if it doesn't, then you're just wrong.
Yeah.
So it gets really interesting.
And this is you all have excited me. This is exactly why I want to make this talk. I wanted to keep it short so we can start talking about these things, because as our nice kind gentleman started the whole thing, of our dialogue here, we have been saying fuck passwords for a very long time. And every once in a while, someone needs to bring it back up again and say, okay, we've said it. What are you going to do to fix it? So try it out. Let's keep in dialogue about what you're using it for. I'll share with what I'm using it for. And they are open source projects. If you find a different way for it, you can contribute. I mean, I'll go back to it, but that is their GitHub page. Your Cloud Foundry, all of the Cloud Foundry tools. Where's that one more? They're all in GitHub. You can clone Cloud Foundry and just use all their tools. And they have a lot of other really great tools for businesses that are looking to take standard internal business practices and move them to a cloud environment.
We have another question or comment?
So I'm Tony, by the way. It seems to me that one of the more intractable problems isn't so much, it definitely is a very difficult problem to try to get a bunch of different developers, different applications to talk together, to cooperate, and all the rest of that. But one of the things that you brought up in your slide with all the nice bubbles that differentiate all the things is, if you've got a full disk encryption going on, like BitLocker or what have you, you have an issue where before anything gets to run, except for the secure little sign-in for your full disk encryption, that's something that getting it to integrate with any kind of other application is virtually impossible. And the only thing that I can possibly think of that could integrate all of these things and include even full disk encryption before the operating system even boots is maybe biometrics. But one of the biggest reasons, and I talked about this with my brother, whose company's InfoSec group won't let him use biometrics even on his iPhone, is, biometrics, you can get a false positive 1 in 10,000 times. And for them, that level of accuracy, in spite of the fact that biometrics is actually still, now, more readily available, that level of accuracy to them represented a risk that was too great for them to take on. So maybe in the future, biometrics could successfully integrate these things with a single sign-on that could be centrally managed, that you could actually kill off the ability of a terminated employee to access things by eliminating their biometric sign-on. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on biometrics?
Well, it's an interesting question because there's so many different sides to it. Look at the Microsoft solution. They're like, let's just take the picture of a person. So now we've got a picture-based one that doesn't have some of the infrared things or depth things, so you can actually use pictures to bypass them. You want to bring the mic over here? He wants to add something to this piece. But I do want to add one thing since it is the Vegas hype. Machine learning can solve. Sorry, I had some machine learning out there. Bingo. Yeah, go ahead.
So biometrics are a lot like security questions. Your mother's maiden name. You can't change them when they've been compromised. They are actually facts about the world that live outside of your head. And so in a sense, they do not have the security properties that passwords...
A token or something that changes regularly.
Right. That an actual secret that's designed as a proof for authentication. Instead, you're looking at things that help with identification. And this is actually a fundamental thing. And so you're going to end up in an arms race with biometrics that you're going to lose.
The best you've got is 10 different answers, unless you take off your shoes.
Okay.
Right, but they're not secret.
Yeah, but people like me.
It took literally 10 different scans for me to go through a fingerprint scan because I've burned my finger so many times working in a kitchen. So, okay, and then, of course, you're not taking into account the fact that people are already hacking eyes with the picture. So,
and fingerprints.
We still don't have a good answer. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be inserting. That was me as a guest and not as room monitor. Do we have anybody who would like to speak over here? Any more comments? Oh, here we go.
While you're walking back there, I want to share one other tool, if I can remember the name of the vendor. It actually it's kind of bridging this gap in some areas. And it's actually looking at patterns. So say you're doing a login on your iPhone or something, and it's actually looking at histories and patterns of way you actually use the phone to tie together, not only biometrics, but the way you swipe, the time of day you swipe, the angle you hold the phone, all those little different characteristics which are somewhat unique and not identifiably easy to mask or take over. There's some actually tools coming around that space, and I can't remember the vendor off the top of my head, but if y'all talk to me later, I'm sure it'll pop in my head.
My idea is that why are we trying to have a silver bullet that handles everything? Either a good password, good biometrics, a perfect system. Why not go in depth to where you have, something you have, something you know, something you are, but make it quick and easy to get through it? Because what's the idea? Why do we have them there? That's what we have to accomplish. To get rid of them is to go to anarchy.
Well, I'm not sure the goal is to get rid of them. There's two sides to the question. One is the management of it. So the ability to manage a disparity of passwords across multiple platforms, multiple environments. When people come into an organization, they change a role, they leave an organization, how do you manage that environment? It's small shops. You'll just have one sysadmin with access to everything. What happens when he or she leaves? You're going to find out that you don't have access to any of your systems. So management is a big question that I'm focusing on an operational side. I'm trying to figure out how do we make that easier, but also on the end user side. If you have an end user who's not even some technical people, but we'll get into them later. But most people who are non-technical, they don't want to manage 15 passwords and every 3 months change 15 passwords. And yes, it is the way it is, but it's causing problems. People are now going, using the same password across 10 systems, or they'll go change the password, and then a few days later, if they can, they'll change it back to something else again. So by putting these constraints on it and not making their lives easier, we're making them go around us, and we're bypassing the solution we're trying to solve.
So, as you were talking a minute ago, well, two things actually crossed my mind. So, for similar reasons that have been expressed, I'm not a big fan of biometrics. But the thing that crossed my mind earlier was about transaction intent verification. So, out-of-band channel, and I think you mentioned Duo. That's one of the many on that does that. But the idea that you can say, okay, I see you're trying to log into X. Did you mean to do that? Yes, no. Much easier than typing in 6 digits or 8 digits from an OTP. Delivered over a channel that potentially, if done right, using like push messaging, could be more secure than, say, SMS, which has all of the SS7 problems.
Yes.
So I'm obviously expressing a bias that I think that could be good, but what do you think about it? What do others think about it?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and with the advent of IAM systems and the integration of things around it, I think it's easier to look at deploying tools like that now. 10 years ago, we couldn't have done that. We didn't have the integration between systems. And we'll always have the problem of like some legacy systems don't support it. Someone's got a mumps database sitting somewhere. It's never going to talk to an IAM. I had to throw mumps out there to see who shook their head.
Additions, comments?
Well, thank you. I mean, this the dialogue is really what I was trying to do this for. I wasn't really the presentation. Everyone here kind of was on the same page with, and I really wanted to have the dialogue is talking about this because you live this life, and people really don't talk about it enough. We bitch about it, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that, okay, a leading criticism of biometrics is that it's something about you that you can't change if it becomes compromised. But doesn't that, I mean, you're right, that does turn into an arms race, but, the ideal is that your identification mechanism identifies the person accurately, reliably. And so causing or creating a system that recognizes something about you that doesn't change, at least that has the upshot of you sometimes, if you're trying to log in that specific user, or you're trying to keep out that specific user if they've been fired, then something about them that doesn't change is one of the most reliable ways of moderating your interactions with that user. Now, it does have downsides if you find a way. Okay, well, yeah, we can just pass the mic around. So I think I've made my point to the degree that's necessary.
Yeah, so that's actually a great point. And I figured I'd walk over here because we're probably just going to have a conversation.
My job is done.
You're welcome to sit down with us also.
Well, the camera's still pointing this way, so we'll keep going this way.
Yeah. So you actually raise a really good point, which is that there's 2 steps to this process that we tend to think of as bound together, right? It's identification, authentication, and authorization. So 3 steps, really. But the identification and authentication pieces are bound. The authorization piece is implicitly bound, but not really. So
Changeable on the admin side.
Yes.
Right,
It's
exactly.
defined by the system they're accessing.
But the key to that, so if I push on biometrics for a moment, right? Some of the objections are that they can increase coercion. They can increase violence. We saw that with theft of cars in a country where they implemented thumbprint readers that didn't include proof of life for the thumbprint.
Let's move you guys up to the front. We have a panel. Just made a panel. Come on. Bring it on up.
Should we grab chairs?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a panel. You guys, this is really awesome.
We are the impromptu panel.
Hey.
Get the whole room up here.
I got the best room.
So where I was heading with that is that if you're looking at a situation where you're saying, well, should we let person X do thing Y? You've got to start with, okay, well, do we know that they're person X? Okay, that's the authentication piece. But then should we let them do thing Y? And that's your transactional risk piece, which tends to be just, well, is there a rule that person X can do this? But to get into some of the things that were being mentioned about, like the angle you hold your phone and things like that, those are transactional risk indicators. And even when I started talking about transaction intent verification, that's got two components to it, right? Do you possess the device that is asking you the question, do you want to do this? I see you've just tried to do this. Do you actually want to? So do you possess the device that is bound to that system? And then do you approve the action you've requested?
Yeah.
So it's as we talk about the passwords topic, what we're really unpacking is not just do we know who you are, but do we trust that you're acting within of your own volition and within the privileges that you ought to have at that moment in time.
If you could just pass it, and before you get into this, I want to throw out the one more thing that I'm not sure if y'all saw this week, but there's a company I think in the Midwest. They're actually implanting RFID sensors in the skin of the employees because I'm assuming they looked at it and said biometrics, so we don't want them cutting their finger off, whatever it was. But then now they're going beyond the fact of biometrics and actually making that part about them an added feature to the person. So I want to add that as part of your response.
Okay. So, I mean, I just wanted to follow up with what you said, is that there is a distinction between identification and authentication. Something that is indicating your identity, or what are the things that you're talking about, these things that don't change. But ultimately, some secret is needed for authentication. Whether it's a secret that's stored long-term on your phone and there's a proof of having that secret through something like TOTP, or whether it's a secret in your head, there has to be some secret that's part of the authentication, because any non-secret stuff can be copied. That's a fundamental fact. If it's non-secret, it can be copied. Just as credit card numbers were never meant to be secret, they were record locators, and you were supposed to authenticate by signature showing photo ID. But starting to use things that work well for identification, like record locators or how you look, your eye scan, stuff like that, using identifiers as authenticators always leads to bad things happening. We've got this case with credit card numbers, we've got this case with social security numbers, and we have this with failure of biometrics for authentication. But the other thing that someone mentioned, I think you mentioned, the point of these sort of behavioral things. It's just like if you log in to one of your Google things from a very different location on the planet than they're used to you doing, they'll have you go through more steps. Mm-hmm. But those things that are kind of, and banks do this for fraud detection. If transactions are happening at unusual times, typical ways you don't do it, this is combined from maybe coming from a different IP address, or you've typed your password differently.
At different speeds.
And things like that. These are used as sort of fraud detection. They're not authentication in the sense that these provide proofs of who you are, but they provide clues that there might be a problem, and therefore they might ask for an extra authentication step. And I think it's important to separate that notion.
And I'll throw out there, you've mentioned the idea, pass mic down, of banks are using this. I'll throw this out there. I'm not sure how many people here are in banking, but how many people are actually having their own applications identify what your users are doing and trying to do that mapping and looking for invalid attempts or things happening within the application that would require you to ask that secondary question, are you really you?
Well, the are you really you question is a very important one, but one of the things that I think we're losing sight of, and it gets back to this gentleman's point of, the silver bullet and the ideal system. On the one hand, biometrics, especially in isolation, is not an ideal system. And you're right. Ideally, biometrics may be one form of authentication, one form of identification, properly speaking, and then you have a secondary passcode. But right now, passwords are primary. Passwords are primary, they're ubiquitous, and they are not terribly secure. And when best practices are implemented, they're a high-friction system. They take a lot of time when you're going to type out 15 or 20 characters every single time you log in. And the more random they are, the harder they are to hack, but the harder they are for the person themselves to even remember. So having biometrics as the base might at least eliminate or mitigate to some degree the problem of I can't remember my password, so either I've forgotten it, and now I need to take a lot of admin time, or I've written it on a sticky that is on the backside of my monitor, or under my keyboard, or in a drawer, and otherwise just terribly insecure. So I'm not saying that biometrics are a perfect system, but when passwords are primary, I think it's a more insecure system than if biometrics were primary and then passwords or one-time use token authenticator or something like that. That would be the second measure to ensure the authentication now that you have identity.
So, we got more people joining.
I would take a little bit of issue with your idea of secrecy, because the secrecy of passwords is, as we have heard through many sessions today, getting compromised. Okay, so that doesn't work. I'm reminded of a story that I heard many years ago, the veracity of which I do not know, but I like the story and the fact that AT&T had a bunch of scientists trying to create an error-free communications channel. An error-free communications channel. We'd all love one of those. There were some other brains in AT&T that were Bell Labs doing some research. They could prove that you could never have an error-free system. No matter how good it was, there would always be errors. The engineer said, damn, maybe we ought to drop back and instead of trying to get a perfect system, find an error detecting, error correcting system. I think that's where we're at here. Mm-hmm. One system isn't going to give us everything that we want. But if we do simple passwords, not big, long, complex ones, just enough to give you an idea that it's there. Okay, now we'll go back and double check your bio. Yep, you look like the right guy. Now we can either do an SMS, or we can do a token, or we can do something else. Bang, bang, bang. Get through it to where you get 2 out of 3. Okay, do you want to? So now you can go to a third level, a tertiary, fourth, fifth level of backup on the thing. Error detection, error correction.
So I'll throw out, I know we're almost done with our time here, so I'll throw out one interesting question to that piece is, what happens if you throw regulations in there, which have been written and hard to change, that require certain length, certain complexities, so to go to that minimal system to make it easier to move toward error detection, how do we get that piece? I
wish I had an answer for that.
So I don't know if, I think a lot of people here are aware of it. I don't know if you are. The new draft NIST guidelines are, they're advising against arbitrary recycling, for forcing people to create new passwords. These guidelines oppose these complexity rules in passwords. So we are actually getting the last 15 years of research on what works better or worse. I mean, because, we got it, still fuck passwords.
Yeah.
But what makes them worse and what works at improving them is finally getting into these guidelines that we can now all cite and throw up to our IT guys or whoever and say, hey, look, NIST is saying don't put in those complexity requirements. Let's get rid of them now.
And then you're processing credit cards and the PCI comes back and says, no, keep them.
Yeah, I mean, just to emphasize that, right? It's stop doing password expiration, stop doing structured complexity requirements, because both of those make people forget. They actually encourage the wrong behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's fascinating to see that coming out of NIST. It's pretty cool.
If I just might piggyback on the elimination of complexity requirements, there was a talk in this same room earlier that was talking about the more password requirements you have, the more combinations you've eliminated of possible character sets, and you've decreased the potential entropy of your passwords. So in some ways, yeah, they can be more hurtful than helpful. But.
So I think we're out of time.
Here's my wrench. Right now, I have a number of different systems. So this is from a personal level. And I have probably a couple hundred different passwords, which for some reason is shocking to some people. I don't understand why. I've been on the net now for 20 years, and those are all active, and I go through my passwords and my accounts regularly and wean things out. I have a number of different systems that are now asking me to record my voice multiple times when I come in so that they can quickly identify me the next time I call my health insurance company or other locations. I don't want to record my biometrics with anybody, not my eyes, not my voice, not my walk, not my talk. And I think that that's because of the issue I have with then being readily identifiable to other entities that are not the one that I gave that information to. So.
And I'll throw onto that the idea that you don't know how they're going to store it, and when that gets out, your biometrics are now not you anymore. They're whoever's replaying it.
Well, the other thing, too, is that goes to something that, it is nice to be able to readily identify the individual from an admin standpoint, but from a privacy standpoint, you've actually hit on something for which there is no rebuttal in the pro-biometrics argument, the idea of privacy, anonymity, and the right to be forgotten. Mm-hmm. So there is that.
So I do want to throw out there are a few people who have not joined the panel in the audience here.
There's plenty of room up here.
Is there anything in what we've said or going through that you would love us to talk about? We can take it offline and hit the bar after this, but I mean, is there anything on here that's useful to you that we could continue with? So I'll end at that point and see where it goes.
Well, and I'll just quickly comment that there's also the problem that I believe it was Adobe recently announced software that with very little, not terribly much training, something in the neighborhood of I think it was 20 hours of voice available, can convincingly mimic any human.
Yeah, and I'm actually convinced that these systems are recording my voice anyways.
Oh, they are. They tell you they're recording your calls.
For training purposes. Yes, training the recognition engine.
Yeah. Well, your voice has been recorded all on this camera here too, so.
Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh, what a great opportunity this was. Thank you.